Hey everybody, Sharon here from VidGamiac.com. Here we are today back again with the Into the Wood update for Grounded, going for the Glob Job achievement. This is to upgrade a tier 3 item at the smithing station. First thing you are going to need is to get the recipe for the smithing station. So we're going to head over to the Oak Lab, and then we're going to meet up with Burgle, and we're going to buy it from him. It's going to cost you 2,500 raw science, so make sure you drop the cash down. You are going to need a bunch of raw science, but you should have a bunch saved up by now if you've been keeping up with the story parts. So make sure you buy that, and that should allow you to craft the smithing station back at your base. Then we are actually going to need to build the smithing station. So your main tool that you are going to use for most of this achievement is going to be a tier 2 hammer. So hopefully you still have your insect hammer ready to use, and you are going to be using this thing quite a bit, so you are probably going to need to repair it a few times. And what we're going to use it on is what we are going to build the smithing station out of, which is going to be quartzite. So the closest location to the starting area to find quartzite is going to be the tripod. Make sure you find the leg that has the cord running down it, and make sure you follow the cord into this cave. Once you are in the cave, make sure you go all the way to the back, and then you're going to notice this rock material that you can mine using the tier 2 hammer. It should be quartzite. Now, you normally would use quartzite in order to repair your tools. However, it's going to be a major crafting item to build the smithing station. In addition to that, it's also going to be a major component of the smithing mechanic itself. And lastly, to spoil the rest of the guide, we are going to require a few hundred pieces of this in order to complete this specific achievement. So whenever you come across any source of quartzite, make sure you completely deplete the source, because we will need all of the quartzite that we can gather. But that's going to be a problem for our future selves. So back to the task at hand, we are going to get back to crafting the smithing station. So in addition to that base quartzite, we're also going to need to gather a bunch of plant fibers as well as sap. These are going to be very common, and you should know how to get these. You can find a ton over by the starting area. Look around on the ground and pick as many plant fibers as you can get, and then you should be able to find sap forming on twigs. There should be some on the twig leading up to the baseball at the starting area. Once you gather enough of those two, we are also going to need some dandelion stems. So you're going to need an axe for this. So just take your axe and then go up to the stem of the dandelion and just chop it down to get it to drop its weed stems. And then just make sure you grab these. And that should be all 4 things that you need in order to make a smithing station. So as you can see, all 4 components are going to be relatively close to the starting area. So that's going to be a really great place to set up shop for this. So make sure you take all 4 components back to a workbench, and then the first thing you want to do is you want to make sure you convert those plant fibers into crude rope, and then you're going to take the crude rope and combine it with the stems, the sap, and the quartzite in order to make the smithing station. It should be located under storage and utilities under miscellaneous, so make sure you right trigger over to that and then scroll all the way down to the bottom of the list. The smithing station recipe is going to call for 10 quartzite shards, 1 wheat stem, 4 crude ropes, and then 2 sap. So make sure you build that, and then just make sure you pop it down somewhere, and then add the components, and then we should be set up. It's going to be another utility item, so make sure you pop it down somewhere where you have access to it. Once you establish your smithing station, the next step is to figure out which tool you are going to use for the achievement. So it has to be a tier 3 tool, and although not required, I highly recommend the thing you choose be a tier 3 non-elemental weapon. And the big reason for that is, 1, you are going to want to prefer that your weapon be the most powerful it can be, and 2, non-elemental weapons are going to make this achievement a lot easier because it makes grinding for resources to upgrade it a lot easier. So that's only going to leave 1 real candidate, at least in this build of the game, which is going to be the Club of the Mother Demon, which is going to be the weapon that you can craft out of the Brood Mother parts. So that's what we are going to use for this. Of course, you can do whatever you want. However, you are going to have to adjust this guide accordingly to whatever weapon you do choose. So, fair warning if you do want to walk your own path on this. Nonetheless, the next steps are going to be the same for any weapon, so we are going to continue on, which is going to be our next quartzite grind. So the first 5 upgrades to any tool is going to require that we have more quartzite, so we are going to hit up some more quartzite grinding spots. So the next best closest grinding spot to the starting area is going to be in the haze area. Now, I highly recommend working on this after you have sealed the canister to shut off the haze. The reason for that is we won't have the haze to worry about, and we won't need to wear a gas mask the whole time, so we should be able to mine in peace. So make sure you go to the haze area, and there should be these canyons all over the place. What you want to do is want to make sure you go inside these canyons, and they should be a very rich spot in order to grab quartzite. There should be a handful of canyons, so make sure you try to explore all of them. You are going to have to deal with the infected creatures along the way, so they may give you trouble, especially if they swarm you. So try to be a little careful, and then just make sure you mind your environment, but just make sure you take advantage of the easy quartzite out here in the open area. All of the canyons should contain some amount of quartzite. However, the best ones to get are going to be the ones next to the field station, and then the one that is going to be in the Rock Canyon, which is going to be the border between the original map as well as the western part of the game that was added in the Hot and Hazy update. So make sure you take advantage of these few spots, and make sure you try to grab as much quartzite as you can. These canyons are also going to be a rich resource of other materials, so take advantage of those. I recommend bringing a tier 2 axe to harvest some crow feathers because those will be useful later on. And then anything else that you may come across. You can get fungal growth, which should help you make grenades. You can get stink bug parts, which should help with a myriad of things. That being said, never lose sight of your main objective, which is to grab all of the quartzite that you can carry. And then just make sure you take it back with you. You are going to need 62 pieces of quartzite in order to get through the first 5 upgrades. So once you save up 62 pieces of quartzite, make sure you take those back alongside the weapon that you are going to upgrade back to the smithing station, and then make sure you go along and then get the first 5 upgrades out of the way. So upgrading a weapon to level 1 is going to take 2 quartzite shards. Upgrading something to level 2 is going to take 4 quartzite shards. Something to level 3 is going to take 8 quartzite shards. Something to level 4 is going to take 16 quartzite shards. And then getting something to level 5 is going to take 32 quartzite shards. So every subsequent level is going to double the amount of quartzite shards needed. As for the later levels, we are going to need something called quartzite globs. Now, to make a quartzite glob, you are going to need a few prerequisites. The first major one is you need to have made sure you have beaten the Black Anthill lab and have gotten the super chip from there. This should have been the first thing that you worked on when starting the new updates achievements. Once you have the Black Anthill super chip, what you want to do is you want to make sure you bring it back to the Oak Lab and then give it to Burgle. Then what you want to do is you are going to want to look in the Raw Science shop, and then giving him this chip is going to unlock the ability to make quartzite globs in the shop. So the thing you are going to look for in said shop is going to be the Advanced Smithing Quartzite Glob. It's going to cost you another 2,500 Raw Science, so make sure you make the trade. Side note here, if you are going for an elemental weapon to upgrade to the max, you are going to need the super chip from the Sandbox lab, which should get you the alternate upgrade, which is also going to cost 2,500 raw science. So make sure you keep that in mind if you are doing a different weapon. So back to the topic of this guide, which is going to be our non-elemental weapon. So for a non-elemental weapon, we are going to need quartzite globs, which is going to require a ton more quartzite. Lucky for us, the best source of quartzite in the game just happens to be directly behind us. So from Burgle, make sure you turn around, and there's going to be a broken window right here in the Oak Tree Lab. And this is actually going to take you to the bottom of the Old Anthill. And the Old Anthill is going to have the highest density of quartzite in the entire game. So as you can see right here, right outside, there is immediately going to be a good vein of quartzite that you can start mining. And basically, if you follow the rest of the cave, it's going to lead you through the Old Anthill, and it's basically going to take you not only through the highest density of quartzite, but also the safest place to mine quartzite, because there are going to be so few enemies to deal with inside the Old Anthill. There are only going to be a total of 3 red soldier ants that you need to deal with. So super duper easy in terms of dealing with any hostile enemies. So you can mine to your heart's content here. The Old Anthill is going to contain a total of about 90 to 95 pieces of quartzite per run. So take advantage of this very easy quartzite spot. And it's another reason I advise that you go for a non-elemental weapon for this achievement. Because if you happen to go for an elemental weapon, which is going to be anything that is minty, spicy, or salty, you are going to need to mine for mint, spicy, or salty shards, which can be very hard to find and also in very hostile areas. So if you aren't equipped to deal with those stronger enemies, you're going to have a harder time of getting those resources. Also, just in general, those resources are going to be way less available in the world, so might as well go for something that's going to be rather common in the form of quartzite. Anyways, back to our old anthill mining spot. I recommend starting from the oak lab like you do, and then making sure you get all of them in the little cave behind the broken window, and then working your way behind the ledge, and then going until you hit this body of water right here. Once you hit this body of water, you should be done with everything from the entrance side, and then what you want to do is you want to make sure you go back to the ledge and then slide down into the actual anthill, and then work on all of the quartzite starting from here and working your way up. The old anthill is going to be very linear, so it's very hard to get lost in here. And again, there are only going to be 3 enemies you need to deal with. So just make sure you take out the 3 red soldier ants when they do give you trouble. Other than that, make sure you don't bother any of the worker ants, and you should be good in terms of enemies, and just focus on grabbing all of the quartzite. Again, it's going to be anywhere from 90 to 95 pieces, so very rich piece of quartzite real estate right here that we can take advantage of. Once you deplete the cave system of all of its quartzite, feel free to try to find the exit and then make sure you return home with your loot in hand. We should have enough quartzite to get through the next few upgrades or so, so we are going to stop off and then drop these off. So to fulfill that next prerequisite in order to get some quartzite globs, we are going to need to have a minimum of 120 quartzite shards. So hopefully the leftovers from our previous mining expeditions, in addition to our previous one at the old anthill, yielded enough quartzite shards in order to fulfill that prerequisite. Finally, the last prerequisite we need in order to make quartzite globs is going to be an oven. You should have an oven left over from the base game, since you need one to not only fight the Broodmother, but also get a handful of achievements in the base game. What you are going to do is you are going to pop the quartzite shards in the oven in order to make quartzite globs. It's going to be 8 quartzite shards per quartzite glob, and you can only make 5 at a time. So what you want to do is you want to make sure you make your first batch of quartzite globs. You want to place 40 quartzite shards in the oven, which should yield 5 quartzite globs. Once you have 5 globs, you are able to head back to the smithing station, and you should be able to advance the weapon that you are working on to tier 6. So make sure you pop that weapon in, and make sure you upgrade it using the globs, and then you should have a tier 6 weapon now. Once you advance the tier to tier 6, you're going to get this little warning saying that you can't put any more elemental effects on this weapon. We are going to accept that because we are sticking to a non-elemental weapon for this upgrade. And then we're going to head back to our oven, and then we're going to do our next 2 batches of quartzite globs. So make sure you put another 40 shards in, and make sure you let those cook. Get your next 5, and then make sure you cook another 40, and that should get you up to 10 quartzite globs. 10 quartzite globs is going to get us to level 7. So once you have that, make sure you head back to the smithing station and advance your weapon that you are currently upgrading up to tier 7. So now that we have our weapon upgraded to tier 7, we are going to have 2 more levels to go. Now, the downside to these last 2 weapon levels is they are going to require us to use a higher form of material known as the quartzite jewel. And of course, this is going to require us to unlock the ability in order to make quartzite jewels, which is going to require us to get the chip from the Woodpile, which ostensibly is going to require us to head up to the northern part of the map. So before you think of getting started, you're going to have to get your gear in place. So in addition to that super OP weapon that we've been working on, which you can bring along with you, bare minimum, you are going to need to have a tier 3 axe in the form of the termite axe, which you would get up here anyways, so you can knock that one off of the list. And then I also recommend having some pretty nice armor here. So try to upgrade to the antlion armor if need be. There is going to be a semi-boss fight at the end of this section, so make sure you are prepared. But once you have all of your gear together, it's time to tackle the Woodpile. So to walk you through this, you are going to start out at the entrance, and then you are going to make your way through the first tunnel. You are going to encounter some termites here, which you should have experience with since you have the termite axe already. You can stop and fight them if you really want to. However, if you are here just for the chip, I just recommend skipping past them since we don't want to waste time and fight the minions. We are just going to head straight for that semi-boss. So just keep pushing forward, and eventually you should make your way out of the first termite cave, and then you should be on the exterior of the woodpile. Make sure you climb these 2 rusty nails up, and then you should be on this log. Make sure you take this branch up to the next log. Be very careful. It's very easy to trip over that pile of sap. But you are going to drop down, and then what you want to do is you want to make sure you take this adjacent branch past this rusty nail onto this next set of logs. I highly recommend doing this during the day. If you do this later in the day, you are going to have a ton of mosquitoes up here, which will give you trouble since they will probably knock you off the branch. There are still going to be mosquitoes here during the early day. However, there are going to be way less of them, and they are going to be way more manageable. Nonetheless, you're going to take this branch up to the tarp area, and this is going to be the top of the wood pile. I recommend setting up camp up here if you need to. It's nice to have a little respawn spot so we don't have to walk all the way back if we do die. So just make your way to the left side of the tarp. A good place for a camp is going to be right here underneath this box. And then once the coast is clear, you are going to turn your attention to the right. There is going to be a cave here, which is going to take you back into the termite mound. So make sure you follow along. And again, depending on time of day, this may or may not be harder. There is a wolf spider roaming around the top of the tarp that may or may not give you trouble, so keep that in mind. Make your way down into the termite mound, and then once you get past this giant log right here, you're going to be in this open area. There are going to be a ton of termites here, so make sure you be mindful of them and be very, very careful. You are going to proceed down into the main chamber, and then you are going to hang a right. You are going to keep going straight until you hit a dead end. This dead end is going to be this bunch of splinters right here, which you can chop down if you happen to have the termite axe. So make sure you equip it and make sure you chop it down. I recommend going in from the side, that way you can sneak in and not have any enemies follow you. They will get stuck, thankfully. And then what you want to do is you want to make sure you proceed down into the depths of the boss room. So make sure you equip your super OP weapon and make sure you drink any buffs that you can take. And then you should be ready to fight the boss in the form of the Termite King. So the Termite King is going to be here. He's going to be protecting the chip. You actually don't need to beat him. If you're sly about it, you can just grab the chip and leave. But if you are going down the more chivalrous route, which is to actually defeat him in combat, you can loot his body for the Termite King carapace, which you can scan to get the recipe for the Termite chest piece, which is a pretty cool piece of armor. Nonetheless, just keep trucking forward and keep smacking him. Take advantage of your super OP weapon and any buffs you have, and you should be able to defeat him rather easily. He's not the hardest boss in the world, but he still packs a punch, especially if you come here unprepared. Whatever the case, if you manage to defeat him, or if you decide to run away and just go for the chip is going to be located in this room. Make sure you turn your attention to the right. You should have this hollowed out area that has some sunlight shining through. And if you look inside, there should be the chip right here in the ground in all its glorious sunlight. So make sure you grab it, and then we are going to make our grand escape. Back to the Oak Tree Lab, we are going to meet up with Old Burgle again, and then we are going to give him the chip to cash in, and that should unlock the next ability in the shop. So make sure you chat it up with him, make sure you say that you found another chip, and then head into the Raw Science shop in order to unlock the next ability. The ability you want to trade for is going to be Advanced Smithing Quartzite Jewel. It's going to cost you another 2,500 raw science. If you are going the elemental route, you're going to want to buy flavored jewels. You unlock both abilities in the shop with the same chip, so you have that to look forward to. Nonetheless, once you have one or the other or both, and while we are still here in the Oak Tree Lab, we might as well hit up our Quartzite mine. So make sure you just do the same thing as earlier. All of the resources should have respawned, so you should be able to take advantage of that and get another 90 or so more pieces of quartzite. And that's going to bring up the question of how many pieces of quartzite we need for the last two upgrades. So to level up a weapon up to level 8 and level 9, you are going to need 5 and 10 quartzite jewels respectively. A quartzite jewel is going to require 2 quartzite globs. And if you remember from earlier, each of those quartzite globs is going to require 8 quartzite shards. So doing the math here, you're going to need 15 quartzite jewels, which is going to require 30 quartzite globs, which is going to require a total of 240 additional pieces of quartzite. So in other words, it's time to get to mining. So up to now, we have established our 3 main mining spots. You have the cave under the leg of the tripod, you have the canyons in the haze area, and then finally your best mining area is going to be the old anthill going in from the Oak Tree Lab. All of the quartzite in these locations should have respawned by now, so make sure you deplete these 3 again. But if you are still missing quartzite, which you probably are because you need a ridiculous amount, we are going to hit up 2 more locations. So the other 2 locations are going to be the other 2 anthills. Both of these are going to have a little caveat, so be a little careful and make sure you do proceed with caution. So, mining spot number 4 is going to be the red anthill. This is going to be the one that's going to be right next to the starting area's field station. So, head on inside, and obviously this one's going to be a lot more lively than the old anthill. As you can see, there are going to be a ton of ants in here, and that's going to come with a ton of soldier ants. So, always keep in mind, worker ants will not aggro on you until you attack them, and soldier ants will always attack you. So, my best advice in order to mine this anthill out is to go all the way to the back, and then start from the back and then mine all the quartzite from here and then work your way to the exit of the cave. So just work your way backwards, essentially. If you ever get attacked by an ant, make sure you let it attack you. You do not want to attack any ants back. The reason for that is as soon as you hit any one of the 2 ants, the entire colony is going to aggro on you, and you don't want to be buried in an army of 50 or so ants, whether that be soldiers or workers, because you will die. As for a 5th mining location, you can also take advantage of the Black Ant Hill over in the western part of the yard. You're going to have to make your way into the sandbox and then look for the entrance here. This is obviously the way you took in order to complete the Black Ant Hill lab. This anthill is actually going to be a very poor choice in order to farm quartzite. The reason for that is there aren't going to be a ton of veins in here. However, it is going to be very light on enemies, so if you are worried about things killing you, you can always take advantage of the few bits of quartzite you can find. You have a major vein right here off this little detour to the left of the entrance of the lab, and there's also going to be some quartzite in the area right before the place where you fight the assistant manager. So make sure you look in those 2 areas and then you can get some quartzite this way. Then finally, the 6th recommended area to mine quartzite, although the least recommended, is going to be in the northern backyard. It's going to be the western part of the northern backyard. In other words, it's going to be the area north of the barbecue pit and south of the woodpile. You should notice a bunch of canyons over there, and there's going to be a ton of above ground quartzite. But with that abundance of quartzite is going to come a high abundance of very high powerful creatures, so do proceed with caution. And to those who are also going to be doing this achievement with an elemental weapon, keep in mind you are going to have to do most of your mining in that location, and the reason for that is it's going to be pretty much one of the few locations in the game where you can consistently find mint, salty, or spicy shards, so make sure you keep those few things in mind. Nonetheless, once you are done with this mining expedition, you should have your 240 pieces of quartzite. Make sure you take all of these to the oven, and then it's time to get baking. So obviously this is going to take a very long time in order to run through all 240 pieces, but the outcome should be 30 quartzite globs. So just make sure you let these run in the background, and eventually you should come back with your finished supply. Once you have your 30 quartzite globs, we are going to need to convert these into quartzite jewels. To convert a glob into a jewel, you're going to need 2 globs, and you're also going to need something called a twinkling shell. Twinkling shells are going to be dropped by a creature known as the scarab beetle. The scarab beetle is going to only randomly spawn in locations in the northern backyard. So make your return to the north, and because life can't be easy, the gimmick with the scarab beetle is whenever you zone one, it is going to start running away from you, and it's going to run very fast up to the point where you can't really catch it. And the other thing is if it ever leaves your line of sight, it is going to disappear by burrowing itself into the earth. So the only real way in order to defeat one is to get super lucky and happen to have one pass by. You want to sneak up behind it, and then you want to make sure you hit it with a critical hit using your melee, quickly switch to a bow and arrow, and then gun it down using a ranged attack, and you should be able to defeat it that way. The other way is to try to chase it into a spider web. Hopefully it gets stuck, and then you should be able to gun it down from far away using your bow and arrow. Unfortunately, all of the luck in the world isn't going to be enough to get the amount of twinkling shells that we need to get the last few upgrades, so we are going to need a total of 15. A scarab beetle can drop anywhere from 1 to 3 twinkling shells, but because we need so many, we are going to need to find a more reliable method in order to hunt them. So this step is going to be completely optional. However, it is going to be the best means of hunting scarab beetles, which is to use a very high-powered ranged weapon and guaranteeing that you kill them in a single shot. So to do this, you are going to want to reuse the crossbow and the splinter arrows that we used for previous achievements. In addition to those, we are also going to need to craft the marksman cap. The marksman cap is going to be a tier 3 item that you may or may not have left over from the base game if you happen to use that for your tier 3 achievement. However, even if you don't have one left over from the base, you are able to easily craft one now that crow feathers are a lot easier to find. So once you have the ingredients, make sure you step over to a crafting table and make sure you craft them. It's going to be 5 crow feather pieces, 5 berry leather, and 5 pieces of silk rope in order to get the marksman cap. It's going to be a helmet armor that is going to increase your bow damage. So make sure you make that, and believe it or not, that's actually not enough to one-shot a scarab beetle. So the last step to this optional process is to upgrade your crossbow to tier 6. And what this is going to mean is more quartzite farming. So make sure you grab some more quartzite. You are going to need a total of 104 to get a crossbow up to tier 6. So back into the mines we go, but once you have enough quartzite, make sure you take your crossbow and then pop it into the smithing station, and then make sure you dump all of the quartzite into upgrading it to tier 5. Then take the last 40 pieces and then make sure you pop those in the oven in order to get 5 pieces of quartzite globs, and then you're going to take those 5 pieces and then get the crossbow up to level 6. And if you are wondering why we can't use the crossbow in order to get the achievement, is because there is going to be no tier 3 bow weapon in this current build of the game. So unfortunately, we have to settle for this. So once you have a level 6 crossbow, a few splinter arrows, as well as your marksman cap, you should have everything you need in order to one-shot a scarab beetle if you ever stumble across one. So make sure you take these things with you back up north, and then we're going to get to hunting the rest of the scarab beetles. So again, scarab beetles are going to appear randomly in this part of the backyard. However, they shouldn't be able to run away since we are able to kill them in one hit now thanks to our super overpowered bow setup. So the only difficult thing left is to find them. Again, scarab beetles are going to be random. However, they are going to have higher odds of spawning near certain landmarks. A good place to look is going to be the entrance of the woodpile. They can also appear next to either one of the 2 bicycles. You can pretty consistently find a few in the canyons in the western half of the northern backyard. Another good place to look is going to be underneath the shed porch, which is going to be the area behind the fertilizer bag. This is where you would fight the super stink bug, which I recommend leaving alone because he will give you a ton of trouble if you come here, especially without a ton of gas masks. So make sure you try to just look for scarab beetles here. And oddly enough, a really consistent place to find scarab beetles is actually a part that's not even in the northern backyard, and it's going to be the under construction area between the north and the west. So make sure you come here, and there are going to be no enemies here, but occasionally a scarab beetle would just randomly spawn here. So take advantage of the free kill, and then once you have enough twinkling shells, which again is going to be 15 total, once you have all of those, you are going to take these alongside the 30 quartzite globs, which hopefully you should still have, and then you're going to bring these to the oven, and then you're going to bake your quartzite jewels. Just like before, you can only make 5 at a time, so you have to make these in batches, but you're going to do 3 batches, which should get you 15 total. So once you pull all 3 batches out of the oven, you should have a total of 15 quartzite jewels, and then you're going to take these alongside with the weapon that you have been upgrading this whole time over to the smithing table, and then you're going to combine these in order to get the last 2 upgrade levels. It's going to take 5 quartzite jewels in order to upgrade something to level 8, and then finally it's going to take 10 quartzite jewels in order to upgrade something to level 9, which is going to be the highest you can upgrade something. So make sure you apply the 2 upgrades, and then you should have your super OP weapon, and that should wrap it up for this super duper grindy achievement. There it is. It's going to be for 50 gamer score. Hope you enjoyed the guide, and that's all there is to it.